Let's see. Okay, should be recording. So I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Okay. Well, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It is my pleasure to spend an hour with you today. Let's see where we are. Okay, we're at 10:30 my time. I am in the good old USA. I'm in the Philadelphia suburbs, so it's currently 10:30 on a Monday morning. It is beautiful outside here in the Philadelphia suburbs, about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. My name is Dave Isbitsky. I'm a chief DevRel engineer with Chainlink Labs. I focus primarily on helping finance with blockchain, smart contracts, tokenization, real world assets, all of that transition. I've spent my career across Microsoft and Amazon and AWS, always on transition and changes and tech. And I fell in love with blockchain and smart contract around 2019, 2020. And I somehow been able to make a career out of it now. I've been with Chainlink since 2024. Uh, I typically do 2 hours when I'm explaining tokenization and stablecoins, with an hour being a blockchain boot camp. And we're only going to do an hour today. So I'm going to make some assumptions. I'm going to, when I say things like game theory and blockchain and consensus, you'll pick up on some of that. If you don't worry about it. I'm going to keep it general enough in the concepts phase. I've been a teacher for decades, and I really feel like you need to nail down concepts first before we look at the why and the how. So this presentation we're going to go through, I'm going to explain concepts, and we're going to repeat things over and over again so that you really get what stablecoins actually are, what tokenization actually is. And then we'll look at some stuff. Don't worry if you're not a developer. Today, with AI, everybody is a developer, right? I'm going to show you how you can use some AI to code some of this. But then I'm going to show you some of the code, some of the contracts on chain and things like that. Sound good? Now, I'm a believer in giving you all something. So this is your parting gift for coming and spending time with me today. You can scan the code. You can, let's go to the next slide here. Or you can just go to this link. This is live right now. So if you just go to bit.ly CLL-Maryland, you can get my entire presentation. And then I make things clickable in there. If you do want to see extra stuff, if you go to the davedev.com, that's my website. That links to every Chainlink video I've ever done. It also links to all the other stuff I've done, including things with AI. I do use AI and code and build daily. And I guess it's not really a blog. I call them field notes. I post to GitHub what I've learned, what my spend is, all of that, just to share with all of you to make it a lot easier. Okay, so everybody ready for stablecoins? What the heck is stablecoins, right? Anytime there's a new thing like this, we go through buzz. We keep hearing, you've probably seen all these numbers. I just pulled this down from last night. It changes, but right now it's around 300 billion in market cap. And you can go, anything I say, you can go fact check me. I'm a big believer in that. Don't take anything Dave says as face value. You can go right now to rwa.xyz. This is pulling data on chain. You can kind of see where all of these holdings are, where the values are, where they are across chain, how that's changed over time, and what the trends look like. But this is real, right? So stablecoins, are at 300 billion, but we have all seen those. I don't know if you're in finance, you've seen that M2 money chart, and it is like going parabolic, right? So we're at 21.5 trillion. We'll see how much more gets printed this year, but the upside is just absolutely phenomenal. And what's got me excited about stablecoins, I started off. Wow, it's jarring when it keeps zooming around. Hopefully, it's not too jarring for you all. Um, Stablecoins to me is the promise of blockchain, right? Is I started out with Bitcoin, but Bitcoin can change in value, and I really loved just the consensus mechanisms and finality and the immutability that blockchain gives us, especially when you're dealing with human beings who can be emotional and can change their minds. To have something like that that's out there, that's a consensus mechanism, allows us to operate back and forth without trust, right? Which is something 2026 trust is lacking, I think, across the board, especially in our institutions, and especially and finance has always been this way, right? It's like this is why you count everything three times. So it's just a perfect match. And what stablecoins do is they offer the stability of something like the US dollar, although you can peg it to anything, and all of the speed and the wonder that blockchain brings. So I couldn't be more excited as this went in the space. For those of you who maybe don't, you're not up to speed on all the regulations in the US, we did have a bill passed last year, I think it was last year, called the Genius Act, which gave us regulation and legislation all around stablecoins, things that actually affect the technology. Like you need something called a POR, which is a proof of reserve if you have a stablecoin. And it just brought like a lot more clarity. Speaking of Clarity Act, the Clarity Act is something that's right now going through the U.S. and I don't have any insight on any kind of timeframes or anything like that. But the Clarity Act is everything else. So we're going to cover stablecoins, but stablecoins is just part of that tokenization, right? That real world asset of moving everything that's analog and physical world, having a digital representation of it, even if it just exists in the analog world, right? So stablecoins come along. What do they do, right? So it's going to give us stability. When you look, again, you can go and look at these charts of like where things are being done and values moving across things like prediction markets and other areas. Having the ability to use a blockchain with a value that does not change, right, cannot be understated. And that's what a stablecoin is going to do. It's going to bring stability into that market. It's going to enable 24/7 transactions, right? It's going to enable you to transact anywhere, right? So suddenly, if you're in the US, you never think about this because you've got the US dollar, and you never think about how you've always had a bank account, right? We have an amazing financial system here. That's not the case for all human beings. And so enabling seamless transactions, instability, and payments for everyone across the entire world, as long as they have a cell phone and a connection, to the internet, is truly groundbreaking. And I think people are just starting to realize that now. It can facilitate, decentralized finance applications, and I mentioned prediction markets and stuff like that. So it's bridging the gap between, the finance world and blockchain. There's two types of stablecoins. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to take out some of the stuff that you might heard, like what is this stuff actually, right? Because sometimes we hear, oh, a stablecoin is just a centralized token that runs off the US dollar. And that's not true. It encapsulates that, but it's much more, right? So it can be centralized. Yes. It can be backed, by the US dollar, but it can also be backed by other things, such as gold, other commodities like oil. It can also be decentralized, right? So you can have this you see some of this in the DeFi world with DAI and RAI, right? And so it offers both of those. It can be fiat collateralized, like USDC, right? Which is from here in the US. That is a regulated Genius Act compliant stablecoin from a company called Circle. USDT is from Hong Kong, I believe. It is not regulated by the Genius Act, but Tether had announced, I don't know the status of it, a regulated US stablecoin, which is why you'll see and hear things like that, right? So fiat collateralized, backed one-to-one. Crypto collateralized, right? These are typically over collateralized. If you ever take out a loan against one of your assets, like if you have Bitcoin and you take out a Bitcoin loan, you'll see that, that LTV, that loan to value ratio, and that helps absorb some of the volatility there. But it can be, commodity collateralized. So you can have, why am I having a hard time saying collateralized today, folks? Isn't that funny? Commodity collateralized, right? So it can be backed by energy, crops, precious metals, right? Like gold and silver, other things like that. You can also do algorithmic. So you control the supply based on an algorithm, and you don't have anything, that's kind of like a one-to-one. So it's really up to you how you're going to go ahead and create these stable coins and maintain the peg, right? So how they maintain their peg, it's going to facilitate fast and low-cost transactions. I mentioned this before, everybody in the world now has access to this. It's going to enable cross-border money transfers. Some of these finalities on these chains, you look at chains like Solana. I mean, it's almost instant. You're talking like 500 milliseconds in some of this. Sui's another chain that's like that too, right? So you have very, very fast payments that you're able to do. It can serve as collateral and liquidity in a lot of these DeFi apps out there. So the liquidity itself is not volatile, right? We need a stable TVL if we're going to be able to trade and grow over time. So it gives all of that. And it acts as a stable medium for trading these volatile assets. Now, Chainlink itself, a lot of you, if you're in traditional finance, you may or may not have heard about Chainlink. If you're in DeFi, you absolutely have, right? Chainlink is pretty much the standard for what is called an oracle, and an oracle is a decentralized. So think of it as numerous. We call them nodes, but they're just numerous computers across a network that come to consensus, right? And coming to consensus based on non-deterministic data. What does that mean? That means if I ask you, what's the weather in Philadelphia, you can go and look that up, right? That's actually determined. It may vary a little bit, but you're going to get a number at the end. Non-deterministic is if I asked you if it's cold in here. You know, that's all depending on you. And you can see, even though it's hot outside, I'm in an unfinished basement, even though it looks pretty cool. That's why I have a little hearth here and I'm wearing long sleeves today. But that's non-deterministic. You can use this with anything, by the way. When you think about AI and you think about trying to get a deterministic answer, right? Typically, when you experience things like hallucinations, it can do with, the context that you're looking in. It can deal with your actual prompt that you're saying, and you can get all sorts of different answers, even though it's the same problem that you're asking each time. So an Oracle network is going to do all of that, and it's going to come to a consensus and give you a finite answer, which developers have found invaluable as they've built out DeFi. In fact, you see Chainlink is powering Polymarket, the new Robinhood chain. Anything that has to deal with pricing and feeds in there will allow you to do that, right? And so why is this important? Well, when you have a stablecoin, we need to, and this is included now in part of the Genius Act, there's not just regulation around minting new coins, but there's regulation around where those coins can be sent, right? There's a term in finance called compliant capital, making sure that we're moving value to customers where we are allowed to, right? Non-sanctioned countries would not be able to do things like that. We need to make sure we're real-time auditing our reserves. So if we go to mint something and we don't have it, let's say if it's in the case of tokenization of stocks, we would need an underlying stock one-to-one. In the case of a stablecoin, if it's pegged to gold, let's say, we would need to make sure that we have those gold reserves. And so Chainlink, you can think of as it fits into this, is that real-time auditing. It goes across the Oracle network. There's a proof of reserve. So this is what you'd be familiar if you're a developer in this space. This is a smart contract. You can actually go look up on each of the chains that's available on. You can read the contract through your favorite little, block explorer. And then there's an actual contract for the stablecoin itself. And then all of those minting events happen on chain. And this is kind of the concept here of stablecoins and how they work on blockchain. Again, I'm not doing the hour boot camp on what blockchain is, so hopefully that kind of makes sense to where you are. Don't worry, if not, feel free to pause me and go watch that video. I'll share that out. But that's the gist of where this stuff all sits. And what I did was I created a cool little demo at the end that you can all see, and it will show you what this looks like in real time, how the pieces fit together. So here's the metrics. I said I just pulled these, but let's go ahead and click and look at it in real time. Again, right? We don't trust, we verify, right? That's one of my favorite phrases in this field. I just if I say that to like normal people, I don't trust, I verify. They're like, what? You say that in blockchain, Bitcoin, or crypto space? They're like, yes. So here's stablecoins right here. You can see active addresses, transfer volumes, total value, right? I can move down here to different chains. I mentioned like Solana. You can see here Ethereum, net flows. You can see where each of these are, which chains they're available on, where it's actually created. All of this stuff is real time and available to you online, folks. So make sure you check that kind of stuff out. And let's go to the next slide. I have my little video window here. I'm trying to drag out of the way, and it's being mean to me, folks. All right, hold on. I want to get back to where we were. Okay. All right. Next thing I want to show you is concepts, right? The first time you have a concept, it's difficult to like kind of learn. This is why when I'm teaching AI to you, you'll see in my real world AI lab, I have flashcards, right? Just the more you're exposed to this kind of stuff, the more that it'll sink in. It takes a while for all of those neurons to kind of connect so that you're not like looking up everything each time, right? So we did this at Sybos. If you're in finance, you're familiar with Sybos. This was like a big touch screen we had at our booth that people could come up. And we've added a stablecoins one here. I want to show you. So you can follow along with me now, or you can do this at your or just watch, or do it at your own leisure. It's just explorechainlink.com. So let's say we want to create a stablecoin. And that stablecoin is going to be made up of 4 different assets, right? We're going to have treasuries, bond, US dollar, and money market funds. Okay. And we want to build a regulated US dollar stablecoin. So this will be Genius Act compliant. And so, the first thing I need to do is make sure that I actually have the collateral for what I want to build that's sitting in my reserves. And you'll notice I mentioned proof of reserve, right? So this is enforced learning, folks. See, I'm actually dragging. So I have a proof of reserve service, and that's the actual Chainlink service. But for understanding concepts, you don't need to remember the service, just that a proof of reserve is actually showing that I have this. And you can see here, stablecoin does require that. So we're showing what we have in reserves, and we're using this Chainlink service to do that. Next thing is we need to mint. So we have these available, but minting, I mentioned, you need to make sure you're using compliant capital when you mint. We need to make sure that we've got all of our reserves. How does that work? I could programmatically do all that. If you've built ERC20 tokens, right? A lot of people throw this stuff in the token, but what happens if your token you need to change, right? You want to have a separation of concerns. You don't want to throw all of your logic for this in the actual minting function of your ERC20 token contract. It starts to get to be madness, right? And so how do we kind of look at this so that we can programmatically do it when we mint a stablecoin, right? So I'm going to go ahead and mint. There's certain services that you can use with that. We have something called an automated compliance engine that allow you to do that. I'll show you a little bit later. But it's important to remember is minting is not like it was 6 years ago. It's not when it comes to stablecoins. You can't just go mint and throw a bunch of coins out there, right? Like you need to look at what you're minting, what's available in your reserves, and then where you can actually transfer that. So our stablecoins out there, it's popular, which we call our stablecoin. Maybe we'll call it the Maryland Bootcamp stablecoin, right? The MBC. So MBC is out there, and it's getting pretty popular. And there's a variety of investors that want to ensure it's compliant, right? And this is what I was talking about here is, finance system runs on compliance, folks. So if you're not familiar, that's how the world works, right? And a part of that is if you're in the US, if you're a US citizen, you've done anything outside of DeFi, if you've done anything like on a Coinbase or Robinhood, you're familiar with KYC, AML, right? So know your customer, anti-money laundering, that is just a requirement. It's a requirement of Genius Act, stablecoins. The automated compliance engine is going to do this. What it's going to do is once that is actually vetted, so like let's say Dave is one of these people over there, there's a hash. It's actually like on Ethereum, you'll be familiar with the function. It's just that KEK function. It's doing a hash of Dave's actual verification that I've been KYC'd AML. That goes up in a smart contract up on the Ethereum blockchain. And if I go ahead and I try and send or interact with that coin, it's happening mathematically. It's not some human being needs to be involved, right? So we're verifying instead of trusting a human being's doing it. And that all happens through ACE. Now, let's say our stable coin is on one blockchain, and this is very, you see this with stable coins all the time. Back when Circle was releasing USDC, In the very early, it was like, oh, it's out on Ethereum. Oh, it's out on, Solana. Like, it's cool to see more and more chains. And we all want this in this industry, right? The more and more chains stablecoins are in, the more liquidity flows into that space. And we move from that 2 trillion to that 20 trillion that we've all been talking about, right? And so you want the ability to move value securely across stream. If you've been in DeFi, you've probably heard about Chainlink CCIP. It's been, with a lot of the stuff going on as the standard, right? As the secure way to do this. And we're seeing more and more customers every day just adopting CCIP as the standard. There's a reason why you hear things like just use Chainlink. You can think of this like the TCP/IP protocol over the internet. This is just a secure way to go across chain. So I want to send USDC from Solana to Ethereum. I do it with CCIP. This isn't a bridge, right? It's different. We all hear horror stories about what happens in bridges. Bridges actually hold the value in the smart contract of the bridge itself. This doesn't do that. You can think of it as looking for finality on both source and destination chain and then securely moving things. And there's a bunch of logic around it too. All right, so stablecoin's doing good. Now we've opened it up to all these different chains. As new chains come on, do I have to worry about it? No, I just connect it, right? Everything just works. Who knows? I personally believe we're going to see thousands of blockchains out there. You may have blockchains internally at your company. It's just the way that this is going to continue to be. Everybody will use blockchain technology, but it'll be their own chain, right? And then we'll see, consumer chains, business chains, all of that goodness. So now we want to connect our stablecoin, which lives in a blockchain world, to some financial infrastructure out there, right? This is where all of the total value today is in finance. How do we do that, right? And that's something called the Chainlink runtime environment. And if you've been following along, you've probably all heard of our work with DTCC, with Swift, with all of these huge entities within finance that are moving value, that are using things like CRE to be able to connect move something from a blockchain on your in DeFi into these systems, and that just lets the value flow, right? And that's what we want. We want capital to flow regardless of where it sits, and to have liquidity, and that's what all of this does. Okay, so we'll come back. You can explore other adventures at your own leisure, and let's go now to RWA. Let me see if there's any questions on that. Okay, cool. Everybody's following along. So stable coins, you know what they are. I've hopefully sliced through the hype, given you some real on-chain metrics of how this stuff is growing, how it's being used, what you need to think about, what a regulated stablecoin means in July 2026, right? The next phase of this, outside of stablecoins, is everything else. And you hear this all the time, right? Everybody, Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan, you hear Larry Fink, over at BlackRock. Everybody's talking about how we're all going on chain. Even the head of the SEC, right? That the entire stock market is going to be tokenized. We are just moving to a space where it's not just humans, by the way. I have autonomous agents using the Robinhood MCP that run for me. They run every day. I have ones that move and analyze funds every Monday. This stuff is real. AI is actually doing trades now in finance, and all of that can happen because value can move back and forth cross-chain digitally, right? AI can't get a bank account. AI can't hold up its face and get KYC'd, right? And so fund tokenization is literally doing all of that. And we're going to see stuff move exponentially fast now with AI as part of the space. Here's a quote from Sergey, one of our co-founders, around fund tokenization. It's happening now. I work with customers every day with this. The Robinhood chain that just came out is another example of this. Just think about, this is not Dave quotes. This is real stuff. The World Economic Forum, there's 867 trillion waiting to be tokenized, right? It's like all of crypto right now, including with Bitcoin, I think is like 2 trillion, right? 97% when I talk to customers in this space, as a BNY Mellon client, 97% agree. Tokenization is just going to revolutionize everything. It reminds me of the 70s when we went off the gold standard into fiat, and Wall Street created all of these new products using fiat, right? Which was enabled, a lot quicker transactions and a way of assessing value and all of that, right? But we've never been in a 24/7 market and been able to move this kind of stuff and then backed by different commodities. And that's what this is all bringing. And you'll see, I won't go through all of them, but a couple more quotes there. This is how people invest today, right? Here's Coinbase, right? Earning rewards. How does all this work? All of this is powered by Chainlink underneath the scenes. But this is where, especially for millennials, when you ask millennials, would they prefer to do traditional equities or tokenized assets? It's always tokenized. It's always in an app. Make it seamless. Myself, Robinhood and Coinbase and things like that, I will always use over a traditional investment firm who maybe has this old, outdated website, right? So this is just the market here. You can see DeFi up in that little corner. All of cryptocurrency, anywhere between 2 and 4 trillion, depending on whether we're in bear or bull market, right? But this is the debt market, stock market, real estate, derivatives. I mean, the opportunity is crazy. And so this is what tokenization is going to unlock. So think of tokenization. Now, what's going to be a little bit different between everything you're used to, right, is something like Bitcoin, for example, is digital. It lives in the digital space. When I tokenize something, that asset is usually physical, right? And it's off chain. So when you look at something like currency, commodities, real estate, art, everybody remembers NFTs, right? So I want you to think about what you're coding against as a developer, and what you're using is the tokenized asset, which is a digital representation on chain. It's not the physical asset, right? And so we still have humans involved here, because humans have to verify ownership and the availability of that actual physical item that lives in the real world. Blockchain can, without a doubt, make the digital part of that immutable, unchangeable, and available 24/7. But it's important to think that, so when you're looking at something like that, even a stock, I have, well, it's the same in traditional, finance too, right? If I have ownership of a stock, doesn't exist in the real world, right? So that's a lot easier to kind of grok. But if it's a house, something can happen to that house, right? And so who physically owns the house? I can transfer the digital asset, which is the ownership rights. Think of it like from a legal system, but I can't pick up that house and go put it in my basement over here, right? And so that's what's new here, is because I get a lot of questions around this, especially around legal and regulatory things. Nothing's changed. We're just building digital representations. So if there's a dispute with an ownership of a piece of real estate, that happens in the court system and the legal system in the real world. It involves lawyers, it involves people, it involves pieces of paper, which are contracts, right? The digital tokenization is the digital representation, which relies on the physical ownership. So just get your head around that, unless it's a digital asset. Then you're 100% on chain, locked, immutable. That's the power of Bitcoin or stablecoin that is representing a digital asset. Make sense? Okay. It's asset agnostic, right? So you can do any financial thing, any non-financial thing. And, it's a programmable token. And what I mean by programmable is I can do things like, hey, if let's say I own a commercial, let's say I want to open up a commercial real estate, a big office building in New York City. And I can mint, let's say, 1 million tokens, and those tokens pay yield. And so I can have a programmable contract that once a month, the rent money from the tenants is deposited as a stablecoin, let's say USDC, into that contract. And then it is fractionalized across all of the token owners. And then the EOA of that token, whoever is holding that, receives that rent. No humans involved, right? No checks, no wires. I basically have a digital representation of commercial real estate in New York City. And now everybody can own a piece of that. And as somebody who owns, not me, but if I am an owner of a building in New York City, right, and I want to have more assistance in the past, maybe you own it, a company owns it, there wasn't a million entities owning it, right? And that's what this tokenization does. And you can see why Wall Street is very excited about this, because suddenly real world assets almost become like the stock market, where I can mint new tokens that represent the ownership. It's almost like issuing new stock. You can only do that today with money in the finance world. You're going to be able to do that with everything in the tokenization world. So that's why people are excited. Hopefully, it gets in your head now what that is. Increased liquidity, right? 24/7, that fractional ownership that I talked about. Global reach, anybody, anywhere. You get a cell phone connection, you can have a piece of New York City real estate, right? Pretty cool. Transparency, it's all out there. It's all I have a little Raspberry Pi over there that is a Bitcoin node, and it has every single transaction since Bitcoin was created there. All the history, right? That's the power of blockchain. That's what you're going to see here. That helps with things like auditing and tracking and all of that, right? It gives efficiency and cost reduction. It allows more transparency and more compliance. It gives flexibility, right? So I can program, have it do things. So if I sent something, like the rent was one thing, but I could also have it if I send it to your EOA, I could then tell it for me to notify me, right? I can do things like that. And then increased trust and security. You can do ownership verification. You can also decentralize this kind of stuff. It's just incredible the opportunity that it creates, right? And so these are the superpowers that you hear: fractionalization, instant settlement, transparency and traceability, and composability, right? Lending, borrowing, all of that. What I do when I work with all of these customers in finance is that blue. I know this is a busy chart there. It's that blue chart that you're seeing, right? Is how does this work on chain? How do I transfer stuff securely? How does it be compliant? How do I ensure privacy? All of those kind of standards. So this is just, if you are interested, you can just go to chain.link. This are all of those services that hit that compliance. And this is all out there. Like, these are regulations that are out there today when you start doing this stuff that you need to ensure that you have, right? And then I mentioned proof of reserves, right? This is actually, if you're going, we have a service called Secure Mint. So before I mint, I need to make sure those reserves are out there. And again, I like to verify instead of trust. So you can go right now to data.chain.link, and this is, let me show you here. So see how I'm doing proof of reserve up here? So these are proof of reserves. You can see them across Bitcoin. You can see them across gold, whatever you're looking for. If I want to click on any of them, you can do this in real time here. You'll see this is currently holding 116,146 Bitcoin. It was last updated 7 hours ago. You can see the history of how this coin is. You can see volume for 24 hours. Because it is a blockchain, right? I can click on here and I can actually see on Ethereum the contract for this, when it was created. This is the WBTC contract. I can look at all of the history. And then here is, I mentioned oracles before, here are all of the oracles in real time returning the amount of Bitcoin that is stored up there, right? And then I can go in and I can look at the contract for each of this. So this stuff is real. It's powering finance today, and it's all available to you. You can go ahead and check all of that out. See, any questions on that? Okay, great. And we are like cooking, we're like right on time. So we talked about stablecoins, and we talked about tokenization, and we talked about the value and the opportunity here. And I defined a bunch of terms. And there is a bunch of stuff that comes with this, right? It's not all just an ERC20 token. That you need to understand, both from if you're a person working in the space and if you're a developer working in the space, or if you're a person working with AI to develop, right? Which now I consider a developer. So I mentioned the cross-chain protocol. This is kind of what it looks like. This is what it looks like. And there's a lot of pieces to this, but there's a lot of pieces to all technology in this space. And I want you to think of it this way: is I've got a source blockchain and a destination blockchain. So let's pretend our source blockchain is Ethereum and our end blockchain is Solana. On Ethereum and on a Solana exists those smart contracts, right? Each chain is going to call something a little bit different. But on there, I basically have a sender contract and a receiver contract. So each chain is going to have a sender and receiver contract. Separation of concerns, that is something that Chainlink handles. Make sure it's secure and available. If you go and you go to like ccip.chain.link, you can actually see all these. You can see these addresses. You can go check out the smart contracts right now if you so choose. CCIP is what sits in the middle. So it's going to go through something called a router, and then you can send across value or messages or both. And that can include tokens, like I talked about before. So if we were going to have our MBC, our Maryland Blockchain Bootcamp, right? I can send that value across. I can also send it with messages. So you could put information in saying, this is part of the bootcamp, this is part of a hackathon. And then I talked about rent being programmable token transfers. You can do that at the time of sending value. So to expand it out a little more, right? Any good security model is going to have a separation of concerns. So we've got a committing Don and an executing Don. So what happens is, if we go over here on the left on Ethereum, right, and then on top of this, there's a risk management and compliance. These are all the other services that are constantly looking at this and enforcing this, right? Like ACE, we can enforce and it can block the transaction if there's not enough reserves. So what will happen here, I've got my token, I want to send it. This is me sitting out here in my EOA, maybe it's MetaMask, and this is me with an EOA on Solana, maybe it's Phantom Wallet, something like that, right? So I've got this router. I have my token pools. I won't go into the token pools too much in this, but it's everything that you'd expect, right? It's burn and mint. You can lock and mint, all of the stuff that we're used to with minting. Now, no value is going to get transferred until we've reached finality on that source chain. So that's where speed's going to come in, right? If it's like Ethereum, it's typically 15 minutes, 12, 15 minutes, right? Other chains may reach that committing finality within seconds. Whenever it hits that, then we have an executing Don that's actually going to move that onto the next chain, right? And so you can see this is all secure and happening in Chainlink. It's not happening like on these blockchains themselves where they can get attacked, right? And so it's different than bridges, right? Liquidity is unified. You can do programmable transfers, right? There's no delay. You're not trying to change an L2 into an L1. That's where you see all these horror stories in Ethereum where, the liquidity drops in an L2 and it has to exchange it in order to move base Ethereum, across base Ethereum, and suddenly all the value's gone. Like people will go from like millions to like $1,000. All that's gone, right? It's just happening. You don't have to worry about it. It's, you own it in your project. It's very easy to add CCIP to your own project. We actually have AI agents that we've built with an MCP server freely available. You can connect to it. You can ask the AI agent to actually send up a message for you, do all of that. We saw a ton of that stuff in our hackathons. So you're owning it. It's not a bridge that's taking your value and you're having to trust them to do it, right? And I mentioned, that L2 to L2 movement. It's not converting your L2 to your L1. It's just safe, secure, all there for you, right? And so think of it as universal. It's just, just use Chainlink for that stuff. Wouldn't it be cool if you had a token that could do the same thing? And it could move across every chain out there securely. And we created a standard. It's called a CCT. It's a cross-chain token. It's based on ERC20. And you can go today. If you go up and to our website, you can actually mint your own right now. I won't show it here, but you can see there's both programmatic and a nice little UI. I think the team did a good job here. I could go pick my chains that I want to be on, where I want the value. I basically set up my minting pools. There's a couple videos I've done on this on YouTube. If you hit my site, if you're interested and you want to do that. And don't worry, I don't get judged on views or was it like and subscribe or anything like that. But if you want to go there, play me at 2x and see me create it programmatically, you can. This is what it looks like visually. And once I create my token like that, and you'll see this, a lot of the announcements you see is using CCT. You'll see online on X and things like that, people talking about how their token is now CCT. That basically means their token is secure and compliant to use CCIP cross transfer, and it's an open standard. There's nothing proprietary sitting in the token itself. So this solves all this stuff for us as developers, right? Programmatic transfers, attestation, in-depth security, no liquidity pools required. There's zero slippage in transfers, folks, which like blows people's minds, right? And this is what you want, right? You just want, I start out, I have a penny, and when I send a penny, it's a penny when it gets to the next phase, right? Pennies 1 cent in the. Is pennies still around? I remember them saying they might get rid of pennies in the U.S. Maybe just round up to a nickel, I guess, right? Okay, so that is CCIP. Now, as we worked with a lot of these institutions, right, when working with Swift and BTCC and other financial customers, there's a lot of moving parts. And like any company, I've been in tech for, gosh, it's going on 30 years now. I worked in big tech for 20 years, and I can tell you nothing's ever changed. If you're not a tech company, tech to you is just overhead. You're in business for business. So when something new like this comes across, what you want is you want a solution that does everything, right? And so that's why we created the Chainlink runtime environment. And the way to think about this is just an orchestration layer. So at the bottom here, I talked about, especially, Genius Act, Clarity Act, there's a lot of compliance here. We're looking at privacy, customer privacy, right? What's actually sitting on chain? You want a hash of information on chain, not customer data on chain, right? With all of this technology, basically every blockchain out there can be a privacy token, right? And you can do it all in here. You decide what you want, and it's even a hardware level security. It's institutional grade. So that's what we're looking at here: financial data, compliance, confidential compute, right? All of that kind of stuff. It covers it. The way to think about it, if you're a developer, if you're not, don't worry about it. Just ignore me. Is things we're doing already today. So we're doing API fetches. We're reading chains. We're doing cron triggers for automation, right? We're writing to chains. We're doing things like that. And so that's what it's doing. Is we've literally seen customers who want to go ahead and create a solution where they're moving their existing financial system on chain, and it moves from months to days. I had one account where the developer sat down, was using AI, but in an afternoon basically wrote a proof of concept. It's like, I don't know if I should tell people this, because my entire job was doing this for months, and I just did it in a couple hours. And I'm like, you'll find something else that you can work on too. But this is what we want, right? We want these kind of tools. So current financial system requires KYC, AML, right? Delivery versus payment. Nobody trusts each other. The DVP is a third party holding funds and then making sure it's happening. Something we don't have to worry about in blockchain, right? Transfer agency, off-chain data, you want to, right? You have collateral, all of that. It just works, and it's in CRA. Here's a little bit of code if you're curious about it, what it looks like. I have the an issuer and a custodian. If I want to call, here's HTTP. So an HTTP trigger happens when somebody does something in an existing finance system. Here's that proof of reserve. I put the little icon in there to match it back for you. And I do a secure mint check. And if it passes that, so this is the proof of reserve right out here. I can go out and chain. I can make sure I have the funds, right? If I do have the funds, then I allow the mint. Automated compliance engine, right? I want to check policy, and I want to see if that policy exists, right? Have it been KYC'd, things like that. I'm going through the automated compliance engine, which is actually a smart contract that sticks out there. You can look at it, and I'm making sure I'm only sending, right? This is compliant capital funds where they are properly regulated, right? So seamless programmability across all blockchains and across all of finance makes it super easy. Again, we have an AI agent that can actually do CRE. This is a bit of an eyesore, but again, I'm handing you the deck so you can go in and you can look at this at your leisure and see how all of this goes down. I basically have the API calls in here, and then what that looks like from an administrator and an interface access. But on-chain, off-chain, public blockchains, private blockchains, finance, it's just all connected through the same system securely and efficiently for you. This is an end-to-end what secure would look like, but I wrote a little demo that I think you'll like that will actually show you kind of what this looks like when it goes through. And so we'll go through that rather than reading through that eyesore. So here's ACE, Automated Compliance Engine. This is the one I get asked the most about from finance customers, because this is the world they live in, right? If I have a stable coin and I want to scale globally, I have to have identity verification. I have to enable regulatory observability on chain, and I have to ensure cross-chain border compliance, right? And this is something that is built in. So I basically set up these rules. I have allow and deny lists. These rules sit on chain so they can easily be verified, right? You can have regulators that can come in and can audit. It's all on chain. All the history is there. It ensures cross-chain adhere to all of those regulatory compliance, and you can get real-time data. You're not waiting, 3 business days. And in the regular world, it's like, when do people do audits, right? Most businesses will do an audit per business quarter, but for a lot of companies, it's when they feel like it, right? This is 24/7, like real time audit. This is why you're seeing all of these financial leaders loving this, because it's giving you a much better understanding of your business and your flow of capital. And there's so many things that you can do around this. And so this is what it will look like, right? If you were to go ahead and try and build this today versus what's on the right, is how do I, every KYC issuer is going to have a different kind of identity management, right? How do I do policy management? I'm going to, like, it's different for every single chain out there, right? Whereas ACES figures out the policy management for every chain. I have to do it manually to enforce this, right? I can do it pre-trade automatically, and you want to automate it, right? So this is that full stack, folks. This is I've got a regulated coin, I've got CRE, I've got ACE, I've got confidential compute, so that I'm not putting customer data out there on publicly on a chain. I can still use public chains, but it acts like private with data, right? And so stablecoins need to activate this way, right? So we can embed vital off-chain data directly into the smart contract. It's all encrypted. I have reserve attestations of what's been compliant and not. When a stablecoin is transferred from one blockchain to another, right, it needs to be verifiable, no inconsistencies or misconfigurations or anything like that. It needs to be just a universal schema that works everywhere. And this was like crazy things. Oh, look at my hand like that with the blue. It must be doing an effect. That's funny. So, it needs to go out and regardless of chain, it needs to work the same. And this was pie in the sky, kind of a US term there, but it needed, like, for this stuff to happen, it seemed impossible. And it's all there and it's all working today, right? And you can check it out. We built it. So I put this little demo together because I wanted to show you some of the code, but some of the concepts, and let it all click together. These are 2 links. Anything that I show code-wise is up on our GitHub repo at Smart Contract Kit, right? So you can grab everything, including samples and stuff for all the services. If you want to do it with AI, I've built this with Opus 4.8, just using Claude Code. You can do it with anything, though. I use Codex and GPT and other things too. It's not limited. It will work with it. Your favorite AI friend. You can go over to Smart Contract Chainlink Agent Skills. You'll see I've got a couple of videos up there. If you go to the Dave Dev, you'll see it on the YouTube Chainlink playlist. If you want to watch me talk about it, you can do that too. So let's go over and check this out. Moving the video window here. Okay. All right. I'm running this locally. Okay. And what I did here was I wanted to demo this in a way that makes sense. So don't let your eyes go over everything. Let me direct where your eyes are, and then you can take the whole thing in, and you'll get a light bulb moment of, okay, these are all the concepts Dave showed me 40 minutes ago, now practically working, and how it ties into on-chain. So I'm just calling, this isn't an actual product, I'm just calling it the Stablecoin Compliance Studio. So this is basically a demo I built. And we're going to have a coin here, right? And what did we say we were going to call it? We were going to call it the Maryland Bootcamp Stablecoin. Okay. And I want that to be MBC. All right. So the way this would work, okay, let me show you here. Actually, this would be where it sits on, it's sitting on Ethereum. You can see the address up there, right? And this will just, open an Ethereum address, right? But I wanted to show you I've tried to put like, some information about it. So a typical ERC20 token, right? You're going to have burn and you're going to have mint and you're going to have all of that inside the actual token itself. So you can see here's an ERC20 token. Now with compliance, right, we're going to move a lot of that stuff out. So I've got this compliance ERC20 token, okay, and you can see it's got upgradable on here. So it's got new events like frozen, unfrozen, force to transfer, but a lot of this is the same ERC20 stuff you'd be used to. So I've got an initialize, I've got a burn, and I got a mint down here, right? Balance of, you can see transfer, approve, and then this freeze and on freeze. I labeled things with ACE where it's new just for ACE, right? But you'll notice that a lot of that logic for like you're seeing freeze and unfreeze, a lot of that logic isn't sitting in the ERC20 token itself, right? This still, if you've done tokens, this looks very familiar to you. Like, oh, okay, this is an ERC20. I got my update. I got all of that, right? What we have here is we've got all of these other contracts that are sitting up on Ethereum, right? So that code I just showed you is the ERC20. But then I have these different contracts, right? So I have an identity registry, which is going to map wallet addresses to the CCIDs. I've got a pause policy, that's our emergency circuit breaker. I've got a deny list, right? Sanctions deny list. I got my AML credentials check for people who have been AML'd, right? I've got a securement policy. So when I go to mint, all of that policy logic sits in a separate smart contract rather than the ERC20 contract. And then I've got, the policy engine up there, the credential registry. This is where KYC and AML our role-based security, and then validator, right? Our common.kyc, this is where we've encrypted whether somebody's been, KYC'd or not. And all of that sits up there on chain, fully, fully auditable. And you can see here, so we're going to do an MBC chain. And right now there's 1,250, and I've got 1.5 million. Wouldn't that be nice? In reserves and my backed collateral, right? So right now I can mint all of that. There's just a little 0.1 I've reserves just for utility. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and design the token, and this is the code I've already shown you. It's just a plain ERC20 token, some code here, and I can decide. So this is, from that policy smart contract, what are things I want? I can put a pause policy in here or not, if I want it. I want to do role-based security. I want to have reject policy, and I want to have both KYC and AML. Okay, so I am the EOA holder of this token. When you mint, you always have the owner. So I am the treasurer, right? I am the issuer. And then I've created some nice wholesome names here. 4 examples of other EOEs. So we've got Alice. Alice is all good. She's done KYC, AML. Bob hasn't KYC'd yet. His license, he doesn't know where his license is. He can't find it. Or maybe he didn't want to take a picture on his webcam. Bob didn't like that. So he's not KYC'd, right? Carol's been AML flagged, and poor Mallory's been completely sanctioned, right? And so when we come in here and we see all of this, I've got a couple different registries here. How much MBC they already have. You can see Alice is an MBC holder. So yay, Alice. Thank you for supporting our chain, our token. And Carol, you can see, has KYC, but flagged for AML. And Mallory here has nothing. She got an AML clear. She got KYC'd, cleared, but she's sanctioned. And for whatever reason, that could be a political reason. It could be whatever. We don't concern ourselves with that programmatically as a developer, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Got our step 1 and step 2. This is exactly how it would look. Let's say we want to mint. Now we can transfer if I have some tokens, but I'm going to go ahead and mint, because we got 1,250, right? Total supply. So I want to mint some new ones. So I'm going to mint. You can see I'm the sender here, and I'm going to mint it to Alice, right? Because she's just perfect. Everything's set up. We're going to do this, right? So what's going to happen is we're going to check. We're going to run. We're going to check the pause, and you can see I don't have the pause. We're going to look at role-based access security. We're going to look at sanctions, KYC, AML. Then we're going to look at our policy. If all that works, we're going to do a secure mint, and then we'll be able to have the funds. Okay, so let's go ahead and see those steps as they come across. So this is now showing you the transaction, where it's calling those contracts. This is just testnet, Ethereum, Sequoia. Right, I'm looking at the control policy right now. So it's saying, nothing is paused. The Treasury, which is me, actually has the minter role, and you'll know minter role from typical ERC20 uh, token. That was funny. I just forgot. And then reject policy, right? So address Alice in there and Treasury, both addresses are fine. Nothing in the reject policy. Alice has a valid KYC credential, so she's good. Has a valid AML, hopefully. Yes, and she's all good. So now I'm looking at the rest of the policy to make sure we're not going over the max mintable. That is part of the Genius Act. You can see 50,000 within that 100,000 max. So it would automatically circuit breaker and stop this. Now, what's important to remember is this is all happening programmatically. We're not waiting for a human being to go look and be like, oh, I need to roll back that transaction or something, right? This is happening programmatically when somebody tries to mint. And it's separated out into a contract that they can't touch, right? That is out there and it's usable. So you can say, well, look at all that gas, folks. Boom. All right, so that ran and we were able to go ahead and mint it. Let's do, look at that, we're good on time too. Let's just do poor old Bob who didn't want to do the KYC. And we'll try and we'll see what happens here, okay? So we should be good here where we're paused and you'll see a transaction down here. So it's adding up all the stuff that's been minted. Let's go here. So role-based control policy is our next step after our pause policy. Everything's good. I am a minter. Now we're going to look at rejection policy. And you can see Bob's not on the deny list, so he's good. But Bob didn't get KYC. So you'll see it hit that contract. We can go up here and look at Bob's KYC credential, verify that everything's good. This has been policy rejected. So this transaction never went through. That was not minted, even though whatever system, whatever DeFi system, prediction market, whatever happens where I was supposed to mint for Bob, that's now been blocked through the policy engine, right? So hopefully that brings it all together here. You can see how all of this stuff is real and live and comes together for you when you're building this stuff. And we are perfect on time. So I'm looking, I don't see any other questions. Again, thank you so much for listening today. That was an hour on what stablecoins actually are, what digital assets actually are, where we stand from regulation here, July 2026, why everybody in finance and all of the big leaders are talking about tokenization, how this is the future, the possibility of how much value is going to flow into the space, and then what you need to do programmatically from code that's available for you today, that's real, that you can start using this stuff, whether you're building it, whether you're using AI to help you build it. It's all available for you today to start putting into your own services, into your own products. And again, feel free to pull down this entire slideshow. It's just there at the bit.ly link. Thanks all. Appreciate you.